Let's face it, overcoming your vice and being a man of virtue seems like an impossible hill to climb. How many times have you agonized over your sin, your shortcomings, your faults? You know that without improving as a man, your family and your soul are at risk. When our ancestors braved the wilderness and the unknown to bring the faith to our land, they could only do so because they were heroic. It is time to reclaim that heroism. It is time to reclaim traditional Catholic masculinity. Let's do something about it. Click the link in the description to be part of the Canadian Martyrs Men's Conference. Reclaim. Welcome to the Kennedy Report. I'm Kennedy Hall here with Joe. He's here to help, and we are going to help you guys with a lot of things today. Joe, what do you think? You think you're gonna make it out to that men's conference? You hoping so?
I am hoping so. I would say it looks pretty good.
There's rumors that this Italian fella from your neck of the woods named Anthony Abate might even be there.
Really? So in which case I'll have to be making it out.
Well, in that case, we're going to reschedule so you can't get there.
That's my road trip, buddy. We did Ohio last time together. So
that's right. Tim Flanders is going to be there. And what hat? Which hat are you wearing right now?
This is my Al Smith Gasman hat. So it says it right here, Al Smith the Gasman. Pray, trust, and don't worry. This is my guy. He sent me a nice care package, and I thank him for that. So
he's going to be there.
Al Smith today. He is.
He's going to give a talk, actually.
If for no other reason, you should go for Al.
He's going to be giving a talk. I'll be giving a couple talks, but sort of more of the master's ceremonies thing. Father Stans, Father Rion, to be determined if there's more. There'll be about 6 talks throughout the day. We're even getting a deal on cigars, so everyone will have the opportunity to have a nice smoke if they so choose. Catered, and it's at a very affordable hotel. You don't have to stay overnight. It's one sort of big day from 8 in the morning till about 6:30 at night, 7 at night, and then you can stay for social. But if you do need to stay, it's a very affordable hotel. It's in Canadian dollars. I think it's like 130, 140 a night Canadian for double occupancy room. Really, that's 4 if you want to share a bed. And that's like $92 American. So it's actually kind of a steal. And it's a business hotel. It's clean. It's talk today, ladies and gentlemen, about 2 topics that are unrelated, but we like to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about evolution, young Earth creationism, as it's called, and versus young Earth creationism. And we're also going to talk about the possibility that Kanye West, with his insanity, is actually pretty much and he can explain that when we get to it. Anything to add, Joe, before we get started?
No, let's jump right into it.
Okay, I'm going to share a screen here. So there is a gentleman that both Joe and I really appreciate, and his name is Pastor Doug Wilson. If you don't know who Pastor Doug Wilson is, shame on you, because you should. Joe and I joke there's no salvation outside the church except for Pastor Wilson. We love him. Relax, trads. We're just joking around here. We know there's real dogma. We're not denying it, but we just love him. He's so great. He's like a C.S. Lewis. He's Protestant, but let's be honest, 99.5% of the time, he's just correct. Mm-hmm. I don't know how he's still a Protestant. Maybe he'll make his way over the Tiber one day. That'd be great. And he's actually well respected by a lot of Catholics. Again, he is kind of like a C.S. Lewis style Protestant, meaning he just gets it about pretty much everything, except for that one little thing. What are your impressions of Doug Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, he's I spent hours watching him at this point. He has a very well. If you watch his videos, even on Catholicism that he's done, he obviously is not. He's not himself Roman Catholic, but he always has high praise for Chesterton. And he says if Chesterton's not a Christian, nobody's a Christian. So, I mean, he puts him within his realm of orthodoxy. And he actually debated James White on whether or not Roman Catholics are quote brothers in Christ.
Right.
So he has more sympathies with us than maybe many of his more quote reformed brothers. And I just think he does things a lot of the time in a very Catholic spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, he's like a C.S. Lewis. It's, you read Lewis and it's Catholic. I mean, you read his book and you go, you sound exactly like a Roman. And then there's the odd thing where it's not. But anyway, he's a great mind and he's really good on the Bible. It is not true that Protestants know their Bibles better than Catholics, but it is true that really well-read Protestants know the scriptures really well. Whether their interpretations are correct, that's always another story. But these men that are steeped in the church fathers and so forth, who remain un-Catholic, they usually do have some pretty good source material for some of their ideas. So anyway, here he's talking about, and the reason I chose this, there is a really good Catholic apostolate called the Kolbe Center, who I've written for before. I recommend everyone go check out a documentary called Foundations Restored. It's an incredible 18-part series. You can subscribe. If you look up Foundations Restored, Kolbe Center, you'll find it. It's really simple. It is an amazing, it's everything you'd hope for from the sort of Protestant creationist world, but with the Catholic background makes it better. But this video, I chose this because it's a palatable 6-7 minute clip we're going to kind of go through here, which just works for a show. But there is really great Catholic content. This video is just kind of perfect for the show. Okay, so let's bring this up here. So this is interesting. Actually, I'm going to put ourselves to the side here. I'm going to make this full screen. That looks better for the audience. Okay, so this is him answering some questions, and he says, are you really a young earth creationist? Let's go through his logic here, because I think it's awesome. And let me know if you can't hear it, okay, Joe?
Sure.
Somebody writes in to ask this question, this very pointed question. Are you really a young earth creationist?
So, yes.
There we go.
Moving on. So, I have sometimes wondered why it took so long. Right.
For somebody to ask that?
No, why it took 6 days.
Oh.
Why didn't God just say blammo and there everything was?
So you feel like 6 days a compromise?
Yeah, 6 days is kind of pushing it.
Okay, let's just for a second. That's an amazing angle. Are you really a young earth creationist? And he says yes, and wondering why it took so long. Well, that's actually a very logical next step, because if you believe that God can turn water into wine just by speaking a word, raising the man from the dead, I mean, it actually is. It's like, why would we expect it to not be instantaneous? What say you to that?
Well, this is somewhat of a, I would say, a learning process for me, because I've not, I'm sort of agnostic on the question, not on the evolution question, but I suppose on the young earth, old earth question. Yeah. It seems like that's Doug would be hinting at somewhat of an Augustinian perspective, because it's my understanding that Augustine interpreted it as instantaneous, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's a fair question, and I don't think we're bound to something like 6 literal days of creation, as in 24-hour days. But it's my understanding that there seems to be consensus of the fathers on the young earth question. So,
well, there's consensus of the fathers that it was not hundreds of thousands or billions or millions of years. Right. That's for sure. Some people will say
6,000 years, bro. Like
right.
Yeah.
Well, some people say, well, they didn't put a number on it. It's like, well, that wasn't the question at the time. You know, they didn't talk about crack either. Or crystal meth, like, you know what I mean? Like, no one was debating it. And maybe that's not a great example, but my point is people. It's kind of like when people say, "Well, Jesus never talked about this in the Bible." It's like, well, no, but it's a subset of a virtue that is part of the natural law, so he doesn't have to talk about it. There's a lot of things Christ never talked about. He never talked about coffee, whether it's moral to drink coffee or not. But you don't have to look in the scriptures to know whether you should. He didn't talk about penicillin.
Well, it's like these stupid moron takes that you hear from leftists. Where does Jesus talk about abortion in the Bible? And it's like, it's so easy to extrapolate what the Catholic position on abortion is. It's just some like mid IQ attempt at a gotcha from people that can't read. Right.
And then scripture is very clear in the Gospel of John with the 6 jars of wine. That demonstrates the 6 days of creation. And and it demonstrates the creative power of God, where you have these 6 literal jars that turn into literal wine in an instant. So Shakespeare, one of the famous lines is, there are more things in heaven and earth than in all of your philosophies. I'm paraphrasing. And so I always say, whether or not I believe that Genesis is a historical account, even if that's the case, there's obviously a billion things that just aren't in there, because there's just a billion things that aren't in there. And that's fine. But nonetheless, the sense of Scripture is that God spoke, and it was. One last thing I'll say, too, before we continue here is, it's also very possible, and we have to, and this is why creation, Adam and Eve, they're all apart, and they all sort of go against this evolutionary paradigm, which Doug Wilson's going to talk about in a sec. When Adam and Eve were created, which we must believe as Catholics, it's a dogma. I don't know where these neocon apologists get to with, they say, well, really a human being is the intellect, the intellectual soul is the form of the human being. And they have this idea that you can infuse the soul into like a hominid. I don't know. It's very strange. I don't know how that's not a heresy. Anyway, but Adam and Eve were created as grown-ups. So if you were to do a biological test on Adam and Eve and say, I put their tissue under a microscope, how old are they? They would look like they're 30 years old, but they're only a few hours old. That's a reality, or a month old, right? In chronology. So there's a difference of their chronological existence and how old they actually appear when compared to other things after creation. So the same thing, it logically follows that the same thing could be true with everything else. It could be that a mountain or a rock could appear a billion years old, or whatever the number is, because under the normal processes, that's how it would happen, although that's very speculative. But at the same time, God created it in its created, fully formed state, which otherwise would have taken a lot of time. So there's lots of philosophical possibilities here. So when people just poo-poo it, there's metaphysical questions that have to be answered. Okay, let's move on here to Pastor Wilson.
Well, actually, it's revealed as being done in 6 days, and basically, it's a math problem. It's a basic math problem, and I think because we're told the ages, we're given a chronology of so and so was this age when this son was born. So even if you have gaps in the genealogy, where a grandfather is reckoned, even if you had something like that, it doesn't alter the math. Okay. And so humanity is it's a young humanity. Yeah. The gospel rides on it, us being the gospel rides on humanity being young, because without a literal historical Adam, we have no doctrinal foundation for the work of the last Adam. And we have no need for the work of the last Adam, because you've started to monkey with the doctrine of sin.
Yeah, this is important. What he's saying here is that it's smoky. What he's saying here is that if there's not an actual Adam, and there's not a humanity that's traced back to an actual progenitor, then this really throws a wrench in. He talks about sin, but we would say original sin. Do Baptists believe in original sin?
Well, I don't know. He's Doug Wilson's a Presbyterian.
Is he really? I thought he was Baptist.
No, he's a Presbyterian, and James White is a Baptist.
Oh, that's right.
So that would be actually the baptism question would be the main sticking point for Presbyterians and Baptists, because they do differ on the
Doug Wilson's infant baptism, I think, right?
He's a Paedo-Baptist, and James White is not. But I do believe their conceptions of original sin they might be a bit different. I haven't gone rooting around too much in there. I know the Orthodox, for instance, have a bit of a different conception of original sin than we do. Questions of original guilt, things of this sort. Okay,
so but what he gets at here is correct. The gospel, again, the ages of the persons in the scripture are not random ages. It's not like so and so lived for eons, and so lived for a generation, and so lived for 767 years. so and so lived for 945 years. These are not accidental numbers. They're written as if they're true. And people will say, well, how could it possibly be that someone could live so long? Well, we need to look at this thing called, or these people called incorruptibles. And the reason for that is, why is it that certain saints have incorruptible bodies after death? Well, we know it's because of their holiness. Well, why would it be that someone's holiness, extreme holiness, would lend them to a physical body that's incorruptible? Well, this goes back to what Wilson's saying about the doctrine of sin. We believe, and he'll get to this, that death entered the world because of sin. It says this in the Bible. It doesn't just say human death. It says death enters the world because of sin. And even if it did just say human death, that would still point to a young humanity. And it would still point to the fact that your sin has an actual effect on nature. Okay. So we believe that Adam and Eve were created in a state of immortality, not invincibility. They had human bodies, so in theory, someone could cut off your head or something, but immortality. And then as you become more corrupted with sin over time, your bodies become less and less able to stay incorruptible, essentially. We see a reverse of that with sanctity. And this is a prefigurement of how this was reversed in heaven when you have a glorified body and eventually a body assumed into heaven. All of this plays in with one another. So evolutionary theory, for one, there is no consensus amongst evolutionary theorists. This idea that there's this theory of evolution, it's not even really a thing. That's actually a big problem as well. There is now mainstream research, so-called, amongst the evolutionist types, that they even deny the existence of the various hominids. So all these various creatures that they found that they say are some sort of part of the chain, which they've never seen, they actually now admit, oh no, that's just an animal. So Lucy and all these different Afarensis and Australopithecine and these sorts of things that have been discovered over the years, there is now actually a school of thought that's accepted in the mainstream by the various thinkers that shows there actually are no hominids. Mm-hmm. There's just human beings and then animals. So, there are a lot of holes in the actual evolutionary theory itself, whereas the Bible's actually very clear. So, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, Darwin himself said that the whole quote theory hinges on the fossil evidence, and they don't have it. But they're starting with when you're talking about these hominids, they're starting. It's sort of like if you think of like something like the Trump-Russia collusion thing, right? You had it was presupposed already that the president at the time colluded with a foreign government, so they're starting with that as their first principle. So then they go around looking for evidence, kind of presuming guilt. It's the same paradigm. So it's like evolution must be true, so we have to these hominids will be there because they're starting with false premises. And
what's that fallacy called? Confirmation bias or begging the question?
I think it would be begging the question too. It's presuming the conclusion in the premises. Right. And another thing, it's you talk about why holiness and death would be the more holy someone is, death would be further from them. I always say one of the stupidest things somebody could say is that death is a part of life. There's that's what people say to make people feel better, but there's a sense in which it's like not true at all, actually. Yeah. Because death it's totally unnatural. That's right. It shouldn't be here. Like we shouldn't die. We're not supposed to. It's disordered, and there's a reason we find it repugnant. There's a reason we're all basically universally afraid of it. It's because it's unnatural. It's like when you're afraid of a horror movie or The Exorcist or something like that. It's because the demonic is not natural. It's twisted. Death is a twisted occurrence. There's like no it really doesn't have a place in our existence. It's here as a punishment, as a consequence. Right. Because of sin, which is the ultimate unnatural thing. Sin is it's like if the roses started throwing stones at you, you would find it strange. It's the same thing. It's uncanny, really.
Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. And Pastor Wilson's going to talk about this here.
Death doesn't apparently come from sin.
Death doesn't come from sin, and there are a host of problems. And the reason with there are a host of problems with old Earth creation, but not as many as with theistic evolution.
Okay.
The farther out you go, atheistic evolution is incoherent. Theistic evolution makes the whole thing work in terms of power and design, but it brings into question our theodicy, our understanding of who God is. Because if God used evolution to create as his instrument of creation, then that means death is not an enemy. Death is the thing that produced Adam. So you have to look at tens of millions of years and of nature red in tooth and claw. You have to look at millions of years of dinosaurs falling into tar pits, sentient animals with central nervous systems experiencing millions of years of excruciating pain as they hunt and die and disease and all of that, because the fossil graveyards are graveyards, right? So what you have to do is you have to have God looking down on that and saying, "Behold, it is very good."
Right.
So now death's not an enemy. So what did Jesus come to do? And if death is not an enemy, then are we going to be allowed to torture puppies in heaven?
Right.
Right. Now that might seem like an odd question.
Yeah.
But why not
It follows.
If it follows,
Yeah.
if this is good, if God says this form of creating is very good, if he likes it, then why wouldn't he continue to like it?
Yeah.
Right. And so in the old Earth, in theistic evolution, death produces Adam. Okay. In young Earth creationism, a straightforward reading of the account, Adam produces death. So Adam is the one who introduced death by his disobedience. In theistic evolution, death is the good instrument that God used to bring about the creation. And all of a sudden, all sorts of other doctrines are out of joint.
Yeah.
So the issue is not a stopwatch issue. If we were embroiled in a debate over whether God created everything out of nothing 6,000 years ago or 6 million years ago, and evolution weren't in the picture, and it were simply a debate over the decimal point in Hebrew. If that's the only thing was, well, who cares? I don't care.
I think there's another thing in this.
So that's super fascinating. That encapsulates it right there. In theistic evolution, death produces Adam, which means death is a good because it produced the first man. In creationist idea, whether old Earth or young Earth, Adam's sin produces death. To me, that is like, from a strictly philosophical, metaphysical, theological perspective, that is my hugest problem with evolutionary theory, is that Christ came so that death has no more sting. Why would death have a sting if it's good, and why should we avoid it? We obviously have to die, but you know what I'm saying. Why would it be something that we'd want to overcome if it's actually a good thing? That's what I think.
If it was as natural as eating, you know what I mean, or as breathing, in theory, there should be no repugnance. You know what I mean? When you're thirsty, you're not horrified of the fact that you're thirsty, right? Or when you're hungry, you're not horrified of the fact that you're hungry. So again, I mean, Doug Wilson just put better, about 10 times better the point I was making, as usual. So yeah, if it was, quote, part of life, I mean, then sure, that there'd be no, it wouldn't be an enemy that needs to be defeated. But that is that's the theme throughout all of the gospel, all of Christian history, and you have it like in the Eastern liturgy, talking about Christ as by death he trampled death. Death shall have no dominion over him, because it has dominion over all of us. And again, like I said, it is the thing we're all, I'd say, horrified of. It's one of the reasons I'm Catholic. It was because I was reading existentialists and stuff like this, and I was very conscious of my own mortality. And I'm like, well, Christianity is the only thing that has a decent answer. therapeutic deism and a modern kind of pantheistic, you'll just return to
the source or whatever.
You're right. Yeah, I'm like that does nothing for me, or anybody else for that matter.
Well, it's interesting you bring up, and then we'll finish off here. Let Pastor Wilson finish, and we'll move on to Kanye being a CIA Psy-op. I don't know. Joe has the wisdom there. You mentioned eating, right? Eating and drinking. Well, that's actually really interesting because those are appetites, and they point to a satiation, right? So we are hungry because there is food. And it's actually, in a sense, it's not good to be hungry, sort of. Like in the sense of too much of it actually causes you to die, which we know is a bad thing. So even within hunger, there's an inherent survival mechanism where we go, if too much of this follows, I actually get that bad thing that I'm not meant to have, which is death. We're not satiated by death. We're satiated by life is really what it comes down to. Eating is life. This is why, from a metaphorical perspective, when Christ says, unless you eat his body, you have no life within you. It's true in a sacramental sense, of course, but in a metaphorical sense, Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and all eating is life. Because what it does is it staves off death itself. If you don't eat, you die. When someone craves death, like suicidal ideation, this is a disorder. When someone is anorexic and they work against their satiation, this is a disorder. When someone is bulimic, follow this through, this is a disorder. However, when someone craves martyrdom, they're actually craving life everlasting. It's not a disorder. The point is it's coming back to this idea that death is a natural, death is a corruption, death is an aberration, death is a disorder in humanity, in the human race. And it's not, God would not create a disorder, because with God there is only order. All disorder, death is a disorder. And that's actually what happens. I joke, the moment you are born, actually the moment you're conceived, you begin to die, because it's a little bit macabre, but there will be a degeneration. This is why assisted suicide for old age and sickliness is a complete repudiation of the natural law, because everyone has and this is why I remember I said this back in 2015, 2016, teaching my grade 12 students. And when they legalized euthanasia in Canada, I remember saying, I said to them, there will be a time in the very near future where you will go to your parents and ask if it's okay for you to die now. And now in Canada, they have mature minors, can seek out euthanasia. It's very rare so far, but the slippery slope is at this point, it's a cliff. It's Niagara Falls. But that's the only, but all life is a terminal illness. All life is a slow degradation of your body, of disorder, of cells not regenerating properly and so forth, not working the way they should, and you die. To believe in theistic evolution is to believe that God created things that were disordered in order to create order. That's like a pagan, the gods are chaos, and out of that you have order thing. That is not Catholic. Anyway, so let's watch Wilson here. Let's watch him finish.
This question, the way it's phrased, the word "really," are you really a young Earth creationist? Right. There's a little bit. Well, it's not a little bit. There's a whole lot of, whenever you hit this subject, there's a whole lot of you can't be serious. Right. Like you can't possibly be so backwards as to hold something like that. Why is it important for us to not get phased by that sort of maneuver? Because I think it happens all the time.
Yeah, because theological truth is not attained by responding to the cool shame. Neither is scientific truth accomplished by responding to the cool shame. You seem educated. You seem like you've been to school. You seem like you've got a head on your shoulders. Are you really a young Earth creationist? You bozo. And that sort of thing. Every theologian and every pastor, every Christian worth his salt should have that kind of backslap just bounce off him. Yeah, we should absolutely not care. So whatever the Bible teaches, that's what I hold. Now, young Earth creation has this advantage. It's got the same advantage that Calvinism does, and that is it presents you with a God who is an in-your-face God. All right, he's right here. If we put God's activity aeons in the distant past, we can kind of forget that he did it. We can sort of conduct our own business, conduct our own affairs.
He's more of a sentiment.
Yeah, and it's a quasi-deism. All right, let's get God out of the picture, or at least get him to stand at the back of the stage. We acknowledge him, sort of. But young Earth creation, the fundamentalists and the Calvinists and the young Earth creationists have this going for them: God is here. God, we have to deal with him. He made that tree. Right.
I've found in NSA.
Okay, that's pretty much the end of. They kind of finish off here, and then there's like an outro ad thing at the end. But yeah. Oops, sorry. Bring Joe back here. There you go. Yeah, I mean that's a big part of it as well. Evolution, I wrote a piece for Crisis about, Confessions of a Creationist, I called it, and one of the replies was basically, well, what about evolution is just God's way of showing how great he is. And I'm sure the person, loved science and all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. And they probably look at these, Cosmos documentaries and stuff and go, wow, isn't that so amazing? One of the things I'll say is the only reason why those Cosmos documentaries are amazing is because they don't show it to you in real time. They show it to you in time-lapsed ways. So it's amazing because you can see it. But also, this is such a modern person weirdness. This idea of looking at evolutionary theory in the world and like finding things and putting together theories and using CGI and all this this is only like 70 years old or whatever the number is. There's no possible way that the human race, for all the time it existed, which the evolutionists would believe existed longer than creationists, could ever even know this. So in theory, they could never have even known that the grandeur of creation is what it is until just right now. To me, that sniffs of modernism.
Yeah, and it's always been this way to downplay, like you said, the Cosmos documentary and things like this. It's always been this way to downplay the role of humanity in the grand scheme of things, to make us feel small. You see these moronic tweets by guys like Neil deGrasse Tyson and stuff like this, who was the one who filled Carl Sagan's shoes in the show about the cosmos. But so Carl Sagan was the one who was on the original series, which I think was in the 70s.
70s, I think.
Like yeah, and I think he opened up with like paraphrasing, but he the cosmos is all there is and all there ever will be and stuff like that. Meaning that you're all going to die, you're nothing, and you're going to just fade into oblivion, which is a real nice thought.
Well, which is it was a theological. He opened a scientific documentary with a theological statement.
Right, because ultimately, as we were concluding the other night when we were talking about this, evolution is necessarily a religion.
It is. That's right. It's necessarily
because the whole primordial soup thing, which we all know about, but we're not.
Yeah, this is what I find amazing. It's like, hey, Genesis is just a stupid myth. The real truth. There was some goo, lightning hit it, and now we have everything. It's like, was that the lightning from Zeus? Like, which pagan religion are you now?
And it defies the law of non-contradiction. Just Aristotle's, you can't give what you don't have. You know what I mean? So the neuroscientists, even quasi-materialists, like the moron Sam Harris, says we just don't have an answer for consciousness. As much as the Soyance wants to explain it away.
Soyance.
They can't do it. And if the primordial soup, if the little thing that we all started from doesn't have consciousness, we can't receive it. You know what I mean? I can't give you $5 unless I have $5. If I only have 4, I can't give you 5.
Yeah, you can't get sight from non-sight.
One of my philosophy professors, actually, I didn't like him at all. He was kind of a sort of a liberal Catholic, but he kind of gave a good analogy for this sort of thing. So he's like, talking about the philosophy of mind. If you blew up the brain to like the size of this room that I'm in, and you walked into the brain as though it were a big room, you would never be able to find a thought.
Yeah, that's right.
If I was thinking of what I'm going to have for dinner, you'll see a neuron firing or something like that, but you'll never see the thought itself, and you'll never be able to find what that neuron firing actually signaled. The thought necessarily is immaterial.
Yeah, that's ideas. I would imagine a materialist has an idea, but he doesn't really think ideas exist. It's very strange. Okay, before we get to this last 10 minutes here about Kanye and him being a psy-op, like this video, subscribe to this channel. I always forget to do that. So, all right. So, Joe, we got 10 minutes. Explain to us first what MK Ultra is, and then why you think Kanye West is that, or something like that.
Speaking of the good Doug Wilson, he did do a video on Kanye. Which is, he might have done more than one, but anything he's done on the question has been well worth watching. I would put it that way. So MK Ultra has a pretty long history. There's CIA involvement, FBI involvement. I'm actually currently reading a book, listening to an audiobook by Tom O'Neill on the case of Charles Manson and the Manson murders. Light reading and stuff, you know what I mean?
Just Christmas Advent reading.
Yeah. So that's all. And I always knew. Well, I mean, we all know that the CIA is involved in things, and it's as good as fact at this point. You know what I mean? But it always goes deeper and deeper than you might think, and you're always kind of shocked and just like, really. So a lot of MK Ultra was basically experimentation in a lot of ways. So you'll look at just to give you the what you say the Coles notes, I would say the Cliff's Notes version of of that sort of thing, was Manson, for instance, and this is just really one example, but it's a very famous example, especially in the States. You have the 1969 murders of Sharon Tate. I don't know if you're familiar with all that.
Vaguely.
Yeah. So Sharon Tate was a very famous actress, beautiful woman, married to Roman Polanski, who is now.
I know this now.
Yeah. So Polanski is now in Europe because he's basically permanently fleeing from a pedophilia charge. So the Manson family were the ones responsible for the murder. We know this. But and there's a good episode of I hate to recommend anything with Rogan, but you have Tom O'Neill speaking with Joe Rogan, and they kind of give you a good 101 version of what was going on here. They had Manson dead to rights, it seems, on multiple occasions, and that evidence was either deliberately being ignored or hid in relation to his case by powerful people. The CIA was certainly involved, and what one thing you can conclude was that Manson was already a fragile character, and they were all basically in an LSD cult and stuff like that, taking acid and all this, and you might conclude, not wrongly, that they were sort of experimenting on Manson and the Manson family, allowing whatever the horrific crimes would be to unfold. So that these are part of the MK Ultra experiments. This is probably one of the prime examples of it occurring. So now, where does Kanye fit in? Mm-hmm. It's my understanding that Kanye said something along the lines of that he's a victim of MK Ultra.
Did he say that?
I'm pretty certain. I don't have the.
I'm gonna look it up as you speak here.
I don't have the quote near to mind. But there's a lot symbolic with Kanye, and I remember texting you the other night. I'm like, and what I was talking to a friend of mine, Dan. Dan knows Fawaz very well, and I just want to plug his music. He has a band called Hallowed, and he has an album out called Dolorosa, and it's very good. You should go listen to it. But he's one of these people. He's sort of a Kanye guy, and I said one of the first, Balenciaga and all this aside, I'm like, you have to. I'm like, the first thing I noticed with Kanye was the mask. And I'm like, Matt, putting a full face, especially a full face covering onto somebody is is kind of a classic MK Ultra signal. You see this in things like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the movie, but you see it at the end of The Shining with Jack Nicholson. Stanley Kubrick seemed to hint at a lot of this stuff in the movie Eyes Wide Shut, and again you have the correlation of people wearing masks all the time. I do think that there was an MK Ultra element to the face mask that we all theoretically had to wear.
Conditioning.
Correct. I actually think it's worse than that. I don't want to
I think it goes to a deeper sort of psychosexual element.
Yeah, for sure. And I
like
mean,
it's kind of like, sort of interrupt, but it's sort of like why were they so obsessed with penetrating everybody?
Right.
That's really weird. Not to talk about the vaccines and the undisclosed, what's that? The unidentifiable disease or whatever.
The unspecified virus of unknown origins.
Yeah,
Hat tip to
exactly.
the critical drinker. But
Yeah.
So it great channel. But so when you say like a psychosexual element, right? So you have things.
It's almost a dominatrix sort of weird.
It's a little BDSM
control thing,
little choky kind of, and you can really get disgusting with all this stuff. But I do think that's it. And Father Maudsley, good on him, because he would talk about how and still does talk about how inappropriate wearing a mask is, especially in the sanctuary at mass, and he wouldn't allow it. And I think if you understand symbolism, you can't overstate the importance of that. So you have Kanye where it's
that weird mask suit he's wearing. He wore it before apparently, so it's not to do with any virus, but it's just some weird thing he wears, right?
The black mask,
the whole like morph suit thing he's wearing.
I don't know. I was more, I know the mask is made by Balenciaga.
Is it?
Oh yeah. That face mask that he wears is 100% produced by them. They say a face has a lot to do with, your soul. Physiognomy and these things. And, the boots he wears are Balenciaga boots as well.
So what would be the point of this? So let's because we only have 5. I got 6 minutes before I got to be on a meeting. So what would be the point? What would be the point? I agree. This is something we should do for a audio or Rumble only thing where it could not be censored. But what would be the point of this? What's the point of this sort of conditioning of Kanye being this weird? Is it your classic thing where the left or the powers that be, they can whip up the Nazi frenzy again or something like that, associate it with Christianity? Like, what's the idea here?
Well, sometimes I think we don't know exactly why they're doing something, but I mean, we could guess. So it's odd to me that certain questions are now being talked about in the mainstream. So I saw I was in a place where I don't have cable at my home, but I mean, where cable was on and regular channel, and they ran a commercial for anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Just a general kind of PSA type of thing. So I was like, what a time to be alive to even see that on TV. So you have, so I mean, it's probably worse than this, but I think it could be, you know, something just like creating a straw man to knock down. You know what I mean? So you have, I think if somebody wanted to make the right look bad, or people that hold a certain view look bad, what a better way to do it than to kind of parade somebody like this around. But because I mean, I'm not particularly impressed by him, and it's like it's like okay, we have Kanye saying a mix of good things about Christianity and then some odd stuff about National Socialism, which we're obviously not on board with. So it's obvious this attempt at amalgamation of good and evil, and then they have their brand on him. So it's just like, don't forget, we're hiding in plain sight. We're right here. Remember, he's ours. So you don't have to. So what I think it does is, I think it, and I think this about American politics, is that you have Trump and whatnot. It creates another false binary. So you have people that are like, I'm not with this, and you have people that Kanye is my hero, and I'm just like, the best thing you could do. I tell this to people all the time. The best thing you could do is, your enemy, the left, these globalists, they say, okay, here, you have two choices. You have a binary. The best thing you could do is tell them, I'm good. No.
So what Joe's saying,
sorry,
go on.
It's basically the devil's bargain. You know what I mean? It's just like, if your enemy comes with two things in their hand and wants you to take one of them, the best thing you could do is walk away.
They're both bad. Yeah, it's you're either a racist or an anti-Semite. Pick one. It's like, huh? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So we'll end this now, and basically the moral of the story is Joe is telling us all to be non-binary. That's what I'm getting out of this.
Yes. There you go. Be a Zer or something like this, and
oh goodness,
refuse to make a choice.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. I'm going to play a clip again here for the Canadian Martyrs Men's Conference. There's a rumor that Joe Boca might be there. There's a certainty that Tim Flanders will be there. Eric Sammons might be there. Mike Church, actually, from Crusade Channel, might be there. Anthony Abate of that podcast I do, that one where about 15 or 20 people
Avoiding
watch
Babylon.
It. Yeah. They might be there. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Kennedy Report. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, click the links in the description. You've watched 1,000 YouTube videos. Do all those things you're supposed to do, and review and whatever, and share it and all those kinds of things. I'm a terrible marketer.
Leave a comment.
That's right. And until the next time, God bless. Let's face it, overcoming your vice and being a man of virtue seems like an impossible hill to climb. How many times have you agonized over your sin, your shortcomings, your faults? You know that without improving as a man, your family and your soul are at risk. When our ancestors braved the wilderness and the unknown to bring the faith to our land, they could only do so because they were heroic. It is time to reclaim that heroism. It is time to reclaim traditional Catholic masculinity. Let's do something about it. Click the link in the description to be part of the Canadian Martyrs Men's Conference. Reclaim.